Does it work now? No. It works? Ah, I have to put the earphones on. Okay, sorry, I'm a bit slow. I'm gonna be like Princess Leia from the Star Wars. All right. Can you get them from the room? Thanks. Okay. Can you put your earphones on because we're going to start? Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Price. I'm a Director of Planning and Program Support at IRENA. It is my pleasure to welcome you here. Excellencies, distinguished participants, partners, ladies and gentlemen. So I have to say, personally, I absolutely love coming to SIDS meetings because when we established IRENA about 10 years ago, the group of countries that absolutely believed in renewables before it was popular was a group of SIDS. SIDS recognized the potential that renewable energy held for their economic prosperity, for resilience of their systems, and became early champions. And our initiative, Lighthouse Initiative, that was established in 2014 during the first climate summit, was really based on the leadership of SIDS and their desire to transform the energy systems in a timely manner based on renewables. So it's a pleasure to be here and especially to discuss very concrete and practical steps, because I think we all understand what needs to be done. I think we have spoken for a long, long time about the potentials and plans. And now we really have to move on with practical steps to turn these plans into reality. So there were a couple of events in the past few months where we really focused a little bit more specifically around the financing and how to increase access to finance, de-risk private sector investment in SIDS, and also how the renewable projects can strengthen the resilience of the and disaster recovery efforts, including after the COVID-19 pandemic. So today we're going to focus our discussion around this, but before we go into the topic in some more detail, we will have a few high-level interventions. And it is my pleasure to invite our Director General, Mr. Francesco La Camera, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Francesco, here we go.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Dear Minister, dear Norbert, distinguished panelists, Dr. Naval. I wish to thank all of you for being here today, and I welcome you all at the Climate Emergency Finance for SIDS Energy Transformation. This event is organized by the International Renewable Energy Agency and our equally committed climate crisis action partners, the Alliance of Small Island States. So thank you for being here. We just in the other room a few minutes ago, we signed a memorandum of understanding with AOSIS to make clear that we intend to strengthen our partnership and to show our commitments to the SIDS. I'm truly grateful to be here amongst you all. Small island developed states are at the heart and soul of the fight against climate change. Each of you have time and time again, even with people who not simply just could not listen. You continue to speak on behalf of your community, your nations, and the planet itself. I want to just take a moment to thank you all for this. And I say that I hear you, and from all of us at ARENA and through the SIDS Lighthouse Initiative, we are with you. Through all the noise and the glamour here at the COP26, you all made it clear that the world above 1.5 Celsius is not a world we can live in. ARENA flagship comprehensive and holistic world energy transition outlook identify that 1.5 world is still possible, but the windows of opportunities is closing fast. The report also highlights that the benefit of the energy transition will be realized even in the short term. By 2030, the 1.5 pathway would boost the global GDP 2.4% above current plan and strategies. The energy transition will result in positive socioeconomic development through the revitalization of industry and sectors currently hampered by volatile and high fuel costs, and the logistics of importing these fuels, which are of particular importance for the SIDS. It is exceptional news that the 24 SIDS have submitted their enhanced indices. Now, let me focus in on the energy component of these indices. Using ARENA's analysis on the first round of NDC submission by SIDS as a baseline, we now know that we'll need to attract a total of 17 billion of US dollar of investment by 2030. This is a mammoth task, but I know there is nothing that cannot be achieved once the people across SIDS put their minds and voice to it. And as I expressed earlier, you will not be alone on this journey. Earlier this week, along with our partners, we launched a $1 billion US energy transition accelerator financing platform. This is in partnership with the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development and with the support of the UAE that has already committed 400 million to this platform. We hope that so we can have 1 billion, and with 1 billion we can leverage 3 billion of investments. We hope this will be one of the instruments to reach this 70 billion investment targets. However, we also know that investment and applicable innovative solution must be tailored to meet each SIDS specific needs. And the investment can be maximized if they address the immediate barrier to deployment of renewable energy. ARENA statistics indicate that renewables energy capacity in SIDS has grown to almost 5.95 gigawatts in 2020. SIDS' unwavering commitment to the energy transition must be matched by the international community's willingness to support this nation. So I hope that from the words of Obama today, fact will come from the US administration. This further includes existing challenges such as geographic isolation and limited technical and financial resources. In this sense, continuing an approach that guarantees support to SIDS across all types of challenges will be crucial. A few weeks ago, ARENA and AOSIS hosted an event on finance during the Climate Week of Expo Dubai. A few essential outcomes of our joint events are also of particular relevance for us today. First, financing renewables energy projects in SIDS must be considered borrowings limitation, scale of economies, and promoting productive activities such as green hydrogen. We must differentiate risks at the country level and investment level, as investment risks for renewable energy are different to traditional energy sector projects. Finally, local banks in SIDS have limited capacity to assess risk and identify possible funding of bankable projects, and they must be supported. ARENA and the SIDS Lighthouse Initiative will continue to do its part to collaborate and support SIDS in tackling this barrier. It is evident that we need to do more to accelerate investment for the energy transformation in SIDS. And forums such as these are a crucial opportunity for government, investor, financial institution, private sector, and the other stakeholders to engage in dialogue on emerging and key technology policy and financial issues. I also want to inform you that in the occasion of our next General Assembly in January, we will have a ministerial dedicated to SIDS. We will have also a ministerial dedicated to funding. So I hope that all the ministers will be there and discuss in concrete action to be taken. Because it's absolutely true. We have seen how many commitments we have been assisting in this place or in New York. The fact is that all of them were commitments, pledged to do something. Now is the time to do something. And we want to make ARENA at as being the global energy agency in the world, to be the place for making dreams become reality, for making action in place. And I see there are also a few young people here. You know, I promised when I took my seats in my first plenary that we were going to prepare a program for the young seats to come and work for ARENA for 1-2 years. Unfortunately, the pandemic has stopped us because it was too difficult to let people coming to our place. Thanks to the work of the UAE authority, now we can say that the UAE is one of the safest places in the world. I really want to run to go there as soon as possible. And but once that the situation will get better, the program will restart, and there will be opportunities for least developed countries, young people, and SIDS to work with us, and then going back to the administration, bringing the know-how that ARENA can provide for them. So that, let me extend the final thanks for you for being here at this event, for representing your communities, your nation, and the billions that look to leadership on the climate crisis. I'm looking forward to be honest and pragmatic discussion. Grazie molte. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director General. Thank you for highlighting these important points. Can I now invite His Excellency Minister Marvin Joseph, who is responsible for health, wellness, and the environment in the two of Bermuda, please deliver keynote remarks.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And thank you from Francesca. I am delighted to be here this morning, but I must make an apology because I am a co-facilitator for probably the most thorny issue in COP, and that is transparency. And I'll be leaving here as soon as I'm through with my brief presentation, so I'd like to apologize. Let me thank all of you for joining us today for this momentous occasion during COP26. As we take AOSIS partnership with IRENA to greater heights through signing of the MOU between IRENA and AOSIS. IRENA has been a steadfast supporter for the work being undertaken in our island countries in accelerating transition towards renewable energy for almost a decade. As the countries that are most vulnerable to the far-reaching impacts of climate change, this transition is critical to building resilience and advancing our sustainable development aspirations enshrined in the Samoa Pathway and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The COVID-19 pandemic was a stark reminder why this transition is needed urgently in SIDS. We need to reduce our fiscal burdens and stem from our resilience on the traditional sources of energy, enhancing the reliance of our healthcare systems and essential services. there is also a need to stimulate our economies, which are in dire condition following the global recession through creation of new jobs and industries. SIDS are not lacking political will or commitment to make this transition. This is reflected in the new and revised NDCs that were submitted by SIDS over the last 2 years, which contain ambitious targets for the energy sector. What we are lacking are resources to overcome the lofty barriers that we face in enabling this transition. These include high upfront capital investments, legal and regulatory obstacles, and unlocking foreign fossil dependencies, and lack human, institutional, and technology capacity to scope and implement large-scale projects on the ground for many SIDS. Let me also mention for many SIDS, remoteness and issues in connectivity also remain a persistent challenge, which hinders the development of renewable energy. The economic repercussions of COVID-19 pandemic will inevitably result in the further delay of achieving these renewable energy targets. Systemic changes are necessary to minimize the bureaucracy and simplify the process to access financing. Current processes are problematic, especially to attract investments for large-scale projects. Furthermore, eligibility rules need to be more accommodating of the special circumstances and needs of SIDS. SIDS needs support of partners such as IRENA to bolster national efforts and overcome our evolving challenges. Multilateralism, international solidarity, and partnerships are critical in our current circumstances. Recovering from the pandemic, enhancing climate resilience, and advancing sustainable development, these are goals that are not currently possible without the support of the international community. I hope the discussions today at this event will build further solidarity and consensus towards a holistic approach in addressing these challenges. And let me end and conclude by saying, for the past decade, Antigua and Barbuda specifically has gained much support from IRENA. We want to say publicly to you, Francesca, that we really appreciate the support, and long before the discussions of building institutions such as yours, SIDS have been benefiting. And I say that I look forward to the future and that we can build on the foundation that has been so well established. I want to thank you, and once again, apologize for not being able to stay. I go on another assignment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and thank you for your practical and pointed words and the time you made to be here with us. Can I now invite Mr. Norbert Garrison, who is the Deputy Director General for International Policy in the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety from Germany to talk to us. He's a good friend of IRENA and the SIDS Lighthouse Initiative for a long, long time. So Norbert, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Francesco. I'm really humbled to speak after the wise words of the minister. It's not only personal friendship, it's also friendship of the Ministry for Environment, to make it short, to IRENA and to the work with SIDS. So we are really behind that, and we're strong partners with the SIDS, and we in particular admire the strong role SIDS play in the negotiations to drive for more ambition. We heard a lot of announcements already here during this this COP announcements from individual parties, the Messine Pledge, the first pledge, growing number of countries committing to phase out coal or no longer build new coal new coal power. And I think what we saw last week is to some extent a momentum. And we heard that some institutions are already coming up with assessments that we may be bend the curve below 2 degrees. But that is only true, that I can say very clearly, if everything is implemented as it was promised. And that is not a given, to say that very clearly. So, but still we have, that's why we still have to do a lot of work. We need to work together. We need to continue to see the power of the SIDS working jointly with committed countries from the north to drive more ambition. We in Germany have decided to become climate neutral by 2045, to phase out coal. The discussions in Germany are right underway to even accelerate that. New government will put climate for sure more in the center than the old one, and we will continue to push ambition, and in particular also other big economies. The SIDS need renewable energies. We supported of that. The SIDS also need adaptation. I will speak about that also in a minute, to become resilient and climate friendly in the future. So Germany therefore has supported the SIDS Lighthouse initiative from IRENA since many years. Since 2016, and we're glad to see that some success has achieved, but be assured we will continue to do that even longer. And one conclusion we draw from all the many various energy-related activities, that we need to become better in facilitating the access to public and private finance. The minister said it, that we need also become better in transferring knowledge and enabling SIDS to prepare their enabling environments and be ready for context-specific technological solutions. And lastly, I really would like to make that point. It's very important when all these many initiatives, funds, and facilities are coming up, that we're also working to a better consolidation and streamlining of the many various initiatives. Germany will continue to provide finance for developing countries, climate finance for developing countries. Chancellor Merkel, outgoing Chancellor Merkel, has announced at the G7 summit in Cornwall that from our budgetary resources, we intend to increase climate finance from 4 to 6 billion by 2025. You may know that State Secretary Flassbart was consulting on the crucial 100 billion question, and was one of the authors of the delivery plan. So we want to push, and I think we were quite successful in push other developing countries also to mobilize additional resources. But let me say a few words on adaptation. Today is Adaptation Day, and I'm happy to recall what my State Secretary has already announced. We will continue to support the Adaptation Fund. We pledged another 50 million this year for the Adaptation Fund, and we know that the Adaptation Fund is working closely with SIDS in the adaptation needs. We also were eventually able to establish a multi-donor trust fund where we have put in 3 billion, which works with the Vulnerable Forum, the Climate Vulnerable Forum, and the V20. And I know there's collaboration between ARENA and the CVF and V20. And let me also say, we see the need to really increase adaptation funding, also the share between mitigation and adaptation, and in the overall climate finance portfolio. But one important element of that, I think, which we all need to reflect on, is to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. That could unlock a lot of potential, which we can use much more useful in building up renewable energies elsewhere, but in particular also in small island development islands. I have a similar issue like the minister. I also have to go in a minute, so I'm very sorry that I can't stay here. I stay for a few more minutes, but I thank you very much for your attention and good luck with this work.
Thank you, Norbert. And actually, we're grateful for all Director General, the Minister, and yourself for making the time to be here because there's a lot of competing priorities. And thank you for pointing out that today is the Adaptation Day. I found it very interesting that around 50 countries did put a renewable energy adaptation in their NDCs, and the bulk of them actually are from SIDS, also showing a deeper understanding of the change that we can make with the shift to renewable energy. So can I invite other colleagues to the panel? I think we have 2 more colleagues to join the panel. Are they here? We just continue. This is fabulous, huh? There's like 4 women here, and I think we're gonna fix it all. Oh, there we go. Wonderful. Thank you very much. So, so let me introduce the panel that we have here today. So we are joined by Her Excellency Aminat Shona, Minister for Environment, Climate Change and Technology from the Republic of Maldives. Ms. Tina Stage, Climate Envoy from the Republic of Marshall Islands. I think she's not here? Okay. Dr. Mark Boyne, Assistant Executive Director of 5C. Welcome. Her Excellency Dr. Nawal Al-Hassani, Permanent Representative of the United Arab Emirates to IRENA. And Ms. Raquel Moses, Chief Executive Officer, Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator. So wonderful to have you here. So let me start with the Minister, Shona, Your Excellency. You're with us in the event in Dubai just a month ago, and I think what was striking about your intervention was really speaking about the real life impact of climate change on Maldives and what is happening with your country already. So can you reflect a little bit in the context of our discussion today? What can we do to make sure that the NDCs are fully implemented in SIDS, and not only SIDS but also beyond?
Thank you, and it's a real pleasure to be here again with our friends from UAE as well as IRENA. IRENA has been a long-standing friend of the Maldives, and we are very appreciative of the work that we are doing in the Maldives together to help us implement our NDCs. For us, we are a very vulnerable country to climate change. We are about 1,200 islands, and climate change is an existential threat for us. Our coral reefs are dying. We're running out of fresh water. We have coastal erosion in every island. So it really is an existential threat for us. And if we fail to act now, we're talking about the Maldives becoming uninhabitable in the next 2 or 3 decades, which is in our lifetime, which sometimes to me even it is very difficult to believe, because I don't want to believe that there may not be a Maldives one day. But we don't like to think the Maldives as just victims alone. We also want to do as much as we can at home to help the climate crisis, even though we did not cause the climate crisis. Our contribution to climate change is negligible, but investing in renewable energy for us is not just about mitigation, it's also about adaptation. We spend about $415 million a year, and that was just 2 years ago when the prices were low, on imported fuel. And we depend heavily on diesel to meet our energy demands. But also it's a very big risk for us because of the volatile international markets for us. So it's a sensible development policy for us in addition to a smart climate policy. We currently have about 31.5 megawatts, which amounts to about 12% of our energy comes from renewable sources. We have a lot of sunshine, which is in abundance, but we don't have is land for us to install solar PV, which is the primary source of renewables for us. Therefore, we need a significant amount of assistance in terms of finance as well as access to technology to implement emerging technologies such as floating solar in the ocean, which currently we are working with our development partners to implement these, while exploring other sources of renewable energy that is available. It is very important for us to be able to have access to these and to be friends with organizations, institutions such as IRENA to be able to effectively implement these.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you for highlighting the role of innovation. Actually, in this COP, there was a lot of attention around offshore wind as well, and I think this is another technology that is emerging, becoming cost competitive, that will make a difference in small island development states. Let me turn to Dr. Nawal. Dr. Nawal, our Director General mentioned that we launched ITAF, the Energy Transition Accelerator Fund, last week, and that the UAE already committed 400 million to that fund. But you have been supporting since I remember from the beginning. There was like a fund for the Pacific, fund for the Caribbean. You kind of long-standing partner in this. Can you reflect a little bit from your angle? How can you see that these funds and the resources that you're providing catalyzing transformation in SIDS?
Absolutely. First, thank you, Elizabeth, and I'm honored and humbled to be in this panel, which is, to your point, a little bit tilting towards the majority of women, which is very rare. The right way, but it's a very rare way. So very happy to be part of this panel. Yes, we're very excited that the UAE has, with the support of IRENA, launched this platform, which is the right one to start the week with. We launched this, I think, on the 2nd of November. And exactly to your point, funding and financing and supporting SIDS is not something that is new to the UAE. The UAE, through the very different platforms, we had the IRENA ADFD facility, which was the $650 million that we started with 7 years ago. And it's now fully under implementation. We had the Caribbean Fund, we had the Pacific Fund. And the reason we are doing that and the importance of having these platforms is that not everybody is starting from the same place. So when we speak about energy transition, we're not all starting from the same place. And we should not expect the same from everybody. And we need to pay special and specific attention to countries that they definitely need a little bit more support to reach, in infrastructure, the right position to be able to transition to renewables. So that's why it's very important to have platforms such as ITAF, which is starting with the 400 million seed from Abu Dhabi Fund for Development and hoping to build up to $1 billion and leverage up to $3 billion. And we're looking at funding projects that is going to contribute to hopefully more than 1.5 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. And the small islands is with the challenges that they're facing, but also with the opportunities they're presenting is very important for us. And we look around and one of the things that I keep saying throughout this conference is, it's interesting how we all came together to address COVID challenges and somehow we managed to help each other by this partnership and collaboration and finding solutions. So today, with the vaccines, with all the global efforts, hopefully we are stepping away from this pandemic. And looking at climate change, it's exactly the same thing. No one is safe until we are all safe. And no one is going to be safe from climate change unless we are all safe when it comes to global challenges. And as the minister mentioned, unfortunately, SIDS are suffering the most. Also, they are contributing there. So platforms such as ITAF, and I invite everybody to contribute to ITAF, and I invite everybody also to look into how they can apply and present successful projects, hopefully, to ITAF, and IRENA will be managing that with the support of their partners. And we look forward to being part of, as Francesco mentioned, an actual practical solution that present not only a theory or a pledge, but an actual gigawatts and megawatts that contribute to a real just energy transition to the world, and addresses not only the energy security needs, but also other socioeconomic challenges that the region is facing, such as jobs and health and wellness and many other challenges that, we are hoping to be part of that solution when it comes to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nawal, and thank you for bringing it up. I think we're going to have a little bit of time to have a discussion around how do we move thinking away from this silo of energy and really start looking at more holistically and how can we make a difference and reinvent our economies and community through the deployment of renewables. So let me turn to Raquel Moses, and you actually work with both governments and the private sector. I'm very energetic. So with your Climate Smart Accelerator, so you're looking to secure financial commitments, and so can you share with us a little bit, what are your experiences, what are you seeing, and what are the opportunities that might be emerging from these new developments?
Certainly, and thank you so much for having me. All right, so the Accelerator represents 28 different countries in the Caribbean, a really large collection of SIDS. And across us, we have, and I hope you don't mind if I make this just a little bit interactive, because I've missed seeing people looking in their eyes instead of looking into the camera.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So, for example, across these 28 countries, what would you guess our average implementation of renewables is? I want a number. 10%. It's actually a little bit better than that. It's 27%. So we have 17% of renewable energy implementation, but yet we spent 40% of our foreign exchange on imported fuels. So for us, similar to Maldives, it is both an adaptation as well as a mitigation issue, especially when you consider what happened with COVID and the disruption to the supply chains. When you look at our NDCs, our goal is 57%. And I believe it is that low only because we can't seem to identify the funding to be able to transition. The estimate is it's $130 billion, and I think it's a low estimate, to get all SIDS to 90% renewable energy by 2040. And so what we're looking at is certainly working with the likes of IRENA to be able to help get projects funded, but also people like the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency to also contribute project preparation, because some of the things that we lack, in addition to finance, we lack capacity to be able to prepare projects, to get projects ready so that they can attract the right kinds of funding. We also lack the fiscal space. So we are an incredibly indebted region because these storms keep happening. Between 1966 and 2015, there have been 782 climate-related events globally. 18,000 people have died, 50 million people have been impacted, and it has caused $43 billion in damage. And yet, we are here having this conversation about $100 billion per year that is not being materialized. We absolutely need access to that money. But we are working with IRENA on building blended financial instruments. We are working with the financial sector within the region to be able to get projects funded. We are working with as many people as possible to get projects prepared. And so it has to be a collaborative effort. But considering what we know, especially on this adaptation day, it really requires, as you're saying, all hands on deck to be able to get these projects funded, because our goal is to get the region to 90% renewable energy. One of the things that you don't hear about, for example, Costa Rica is already at 100%, but they don't talk about SIDS when they're talking about the achievements. And I think that too helps us to build our capacity, because then we know what's possible.
Thank you so much. And thank you for pointing out this. I think Dr. Nawal reflected in the same vein. It's, they're not the same solutions. We need to think a little bit innovatively about how do we overcome the particular situation, and I'm actually quite familiar with the Caribbean and the issues around the utility lock-in and issues around that they're not that common in other places. So really targeted thinking and solutions is necessary. So let me talk to Dr. Mark Baino. I'm going to mispronounce your name. Can you just tell me what your last name? Baino. Okay, that's easy. Thank you. And so you are the the executive director of the 5C, and I mean you have done a lot of hands-on work around this financing, and you work with GCF and all that. Can you tell us a little bit of your experience and how we can ensure that you can tap into this financial potential that Raquel was mentioning?
Well, thanks again, and good day, good afternoon to everyone. And the 5Cs is pleased to be part of this panel and maybe bring some gender balance. The important thing to note is that we represent 14 sovereign states within the Caribbean. What we seek to do is to coordinate the region's response to climate change. And that implies not only focusing on mitigation or adaptation, but building resilience. And to build resilience, we find having a blended approach between both adaptation and mitigation is essential. Raquel mentioned, for example, that 40% of our foreign exchange is being utilized to purchase fossil fuel. As much as 60% of our export earnings are leaking out of the economies for the acquisition of fossil fuel. But at the same time, we have another challenge in the Caribbean, and that is 8 of the 14 sovereign states are classified as water scarce. How do we get around, therefore, generating fresh water or potable water and at the same time deal with the energy challenge, since much of the water that has to reach households comes through the basis of utilizing energy? So we, for example, have engaged in elements that require the utilization of saltwater reverse osmosis systems, but driven by renewable energy, so that it takes the strain off of the grid, and also it allows for a much greener pathway. Additionally, we have sought to move away from the silo type approach. It is neither energy, or is it food security, or is it water, but rather to take an ecosystem-based approach, as we have done with the country of Barbados, where we were able to secure the first investment project for the Caribbean, which is a $45 million project that incorporates elements of water security, energy, and land preservation. So in actual fact, we see where this blended approach is taken, we are able to achieve a lot more. Raquel also made mention, which I have to pivot to, that the challenges we face include economies from the size of over 3 million, like in the case of Jamaica, to economies that have just 66,000 people. So it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. And so you need to be cognizant of these idiosyncrasies. Therefore, how do we deal with this? There are some countries that will require some hand-holding, that will lack the requisite capacity to unlock the requisite finances. Additionally, I think it's time we get away from seeking to provide $10 million, for example, for a region, and say each person will build half a bridge. That will not work. Maybe we need to take a more prioritized approach, because the investments are needed at scale. 10 million may seem a lot, but when you start divvying it up, it really doesn't go very far. The last point I would like to make, however, is that let there be no illusions. Transformation will be costly, and it will hurt in the short term, simply because the infrastructure that is required, the investments that are required, and the scale that is often required would mean that we all will have to bear some of that cost. Let me give you an example. The project I refer to in the case of Barbados, the major consumer is the water utility. When you are transitioning now towards renewable energy, the water utility doesn't have a reliable source of revenue. So all of those sunk costs have to be catered for. And therefore it requires us as consumers, not taking a esoteric approach, but being very practical and knowing that it will cost us. And therefore, if we want this transition to happen, we all have to put some skin in the game. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And the Minister Shona apologized because she was called into a ministerial discussion. And you know what, I'm gonna go off script now, because I think you have said some really interesting things, and I'm always puzzled why is it that we are not more pragmatic about some of these issues? If you said 40% of your, I mean, I don't want to repeat enough, because you said it twice and I have it written down. So why, it's so illogical to keep on doing the same thing. So what is the problem? Why can't we replicate? Why can't we just shift?
You know, I think, if I said to you, right, in order for you to solve climate change, you personally, you would have to put up $10 million, just you. If you don't have that $10 million, you cannot solve the problem with all of the will in the world. And that is the challenge that we face. We absolutely, the one thing that surprised me most of all in coming into this role is there is no lack of passion or will to make the transition. What we lack is the financial capacity. And until we have the money that is required upfront, that we know will save us money in the long run, unless we have that, we cannot make the transition. Or whether we have the policies in place or the capacity to put the right policies in place to take advantage of the opportunities that come to us. So there are a number of barriers that we face that are seemingly insurmountable, that part of this 100 billion could help to alleviate. But until we get access to that funding, we are just sitting ducks waiting for a solution to find us, because we neither have the capacity, the fiscal space, or the upfront funding to be able to make the transition.
Yeah, thank you, Raquel. And Mark, you mentioned, I'm going to go back to Dr. Nawal actually to kind of write it up from the more donor perspective, but and maybe your own government experience. But let me ask Mark a question before I go to you. Mark, you talked about ecosystem. So do you think, I mean, part of the problem is this, the way the governments are structured. Now you have ministry for this, ministry for that, and you know they do their daily jobs, and it's not really open to sort of cross-pollination of views or whatever. So do you see any interesting models where this ecosystem approach is emerging that you think could be replicated?
Yes, as I mentioned, in the case of Barbados, we have started that. We now have what we call a 3R cruise approach for another project that we are seeking to submit to the GCF that takes more, not just a ridge to reef, but a roof to reef kind of approach. In actual fact, where we are seeking to bring together the various stresses.
I don't know what that means, that expression.
What I'm basically saying, we're looking at issues of water harvesting, we're looking at issues of wastewater treatment, we're looking at issues of better water management, and included within that would be issues around renewable energy, energy transformation, energy policy, and also food security. So it's not a kind of segmented approach, but more bringing the various elements together to build resilience. Let's take, for example, when a hurricane passes through the Caribbean, it's amazing that some of the first systems to close would be your airport. When your airport closes, most of our hydrometeorological stations are at the airport. So it starts reducing your capacity to be able to provide information and provide information on a timely basis. When the hurricane actually passes, some of our first utilities to go, it's energy, because most of our poles are still above ground. So if you only take a very segmented approach, you will continue to impact things like health, things like education, and even the freshwater supply. So it cannot just be one sector. It has to be across the board. And that's what we're trying to inculcate into our people. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So let me go to Dr. Nawal. And actually both Mark and Raquel mentioned this in different forms. So, you know, first of all, in some countries, you will not be able to attract private investment ever because of the size and scale, and sometimes we'll just need grant funding. Sometimes there's issues around debt and what you can do. And then there's this double money that you need for transition when you need to fund the future while you're still living day-to-day basis. So the UAE actually has done quite a lot of introduced quite a lot of flexibility in your support to SIDS, and also the thinking. I mean, we are working on food security and energy nexus. How do you think we can actually mainstream that in a donor thinking as well? Because we're seeing it conceptually, but how do we multiply that?
I think the only entity that's capable of doing this is IRENA, because there are funding around, so much money around. But to your point, it's very difficult for investment to come to a country when there is not the right political and policy framework. And I think political stability and having the right, and I'm being very, very candid and very honest, and having the right policy framework in place is the key to unlock a lot of those barriers and those challenges. I'm just going to quote some numbers as everybody was talking about finance. I looked like, the UAE alone in the ADFD, the IRENA ADFD facility, has identified and developed more than 26 projects in developing countries. ADFD alone has implemented more than 9,000 megawatts of renewable energy in 65 countries. And ADFD does not give grants. Those are, concessional loans. But even on the grants level, we did have 100 million grants from between the Pacific and the Caribbean islands. So my point is, are there funds around? I think there are funds around. Do we have a need? Definitely, we have a need. Can we maybe do this connection? I think and that's why we need platforms such as ITAF. We need the work that IRENA is doing in helping and supporting countries to develop the right political framework, the right policy framework, and the right investment platform. But also, we need that political will and that passion to be translated when we have those global gatherings. Because one of the things that I went and I asked some of our leadership why we are not funding any projects when it comes, for example, one of the biggest challenges, I realized that there is no access to clean cooking, and I was like, how come we are not doing more clean cooking? And they were like, you know what, it never comes in the conversation when we meet with global leaders, because people are not flagging it. So my point is, when there is a very clear passion and commitment towards solutions, I think it needs to be communicated in the right platform with the right environment that is attractive for investors and investment. Because end of the day, for us to make renewable energy a business case, it has to have a return on investment for investors, and I think we have all the potential. Cost has gone down. There isn't much now. That most technologies now, with the innovation in them, their cost is declining, but their efficiency is improving. And we in the UAE, we never look at renewable energy as only infrastructure. We always look at renewable energy solution as both. It's an infrastructure project, but the aim of it is to provide socioeconomic benefits for the country and the zone where we are investing. Because what matters most is how many jobs we are creating, how many lives we are improving, and how much we are contributing to the long-term sustainability of that country. Because it's not something, we are not going to just put a solar PV on one facility or have a plant and just leave. We want to see how that investment has contributed to the well-being of the people of that country.
Thank you, Dr. Nawal. And I'm going to be venturing into myself being fired in the next round of questions, but I want to welcome Ms. Tina Stage, who is the climate envoy from Marshall Islands. Thank you for joining us. And we actually have gone off script totally, so that you know, but let us just, I think it's okay. No, it's okay if you say that. It's fine. So we have heard some example from the Caribbean, and in the beginning we also had the Maldives here represented, but we have not actually heard much of the Pacific. So it would be great if you can bring the Pacific perspective in the conversation. We're talking how to accelerate investment and what are the avenues and practical examples of success.
Hello, thank you. I'm so sorry for having
It's really
come
okay.
in late. Not my choice. But it's really an honor to be here with you and to be sitting with my illustrious colleagues on this panel. I also want to start by acknowledging the work of my colleague back on the ground in the Marshals, who really helped provide some of the latest sort of information, Angeline Heine, and normally she would have been the one sitting in this chair, but because of the very difficult travel from the Pacific, she's not here. And so I'll do my very best to represent the much broader depth of knowledge that she would have brought, but to just bring some of the things that I know we talk about when we are talking about the transition in the Marshals. So we have been at other COPs, and particularly in 2018, the Marshals has done quite a bit of work and has always been in the lead in talking about the need to achieve very ambitious mitigation targets, the need to fully decarbonize by 2050, and to really quickly transition our sector to at least 50% renewable energy by 2030. These are all things that we've not only talked about, but we have done much of the work to cost, to plan, and essentially envision the roadmap to get there. So we have an electricity roadmap. With technically sound renewable energy pathways for our energy sector to make this transition. And that roadmap has 3 components, which folks on the ground in the Marshals identified as sort of the key pillars for making it happen. So this is in human resources, in particular capacity, addressing some of the capacity constraints that we have. It's in renewable energy technologies and investment. And work under that is progressing and has progressed. COVID had an impact. But really, I think what I'm here to say is that the problem is financing. I mean, we did the plans. We have the people in place who can implement the plans. We have taken those plans to donors to try to get financing to make it happen. And it's not happening. So just to give you an example, to meet our 2030 targets, we essentially need about $25 million. That would include about 14 million to fund PV solar systems in several of our semi-urban centers that have the larger population, and an additional about 9 million to fully transition EBI, which is our urban center in Kwajalein, to renewable energy. If we have $25 million, we can meet our 2030 target. We have not been able to finance that thus far, and not for lack of trying. So I think we just need the world to understand that, you know, we've done the work. We've put in the plans, we put in the time. We continue to be ambitious. We've made progress. I don't want to discount all the progress we have been able to make to date and the support that we have been able to receive thus far to get where we are. And so, for example, over the last 15 years, we've been able to take all of our households on the outer islands, previously without electricity, they now all have solar home systems. And there are several larger scale solar projects in the urban center of Madro, totally about 1 megawatt, that have been put in place. And that's, you know, with the, you know, support of the EU, we've had support from GIZ. There's really been a lot of support, but we have a gap and we need help in addressing that gap. And I think that's part of the reason that the Marshall Islands is here at this COP is to talk about where the gaps are. The fact that if those gaps are addressed, we have very ambitious plans in place to get us where we need to be nationally. And we're ready to do the work. We're very much ready to do the work. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tina, so much. And we know you are, because we've been working with SIDS for a long time, and we know the most ambition and most commitment comes from small island developing states. And we will continue to do our part in making sure that that both these issues are visible, to provide the support that we can as ARENA, but also bring in partners who can actually help realize this level of finance. And frankly, when I hear 25 million, it's just, Raquel, I could see that you were like, you really wanted to say something.
Yeah, you know, when you hear 25 million, what a drop in the bucket. That should be so easy a gap to close. But what we're seeing is that on one side, and what we're hearing today is on one side, there is no lack of ambition and no lack of projects. And on the other side, there is no lack of money. But there is a disconnect in the middle between the kind of money available and that being fit for purpose for what those projects need. And that is the gap that we need to close, because we are having the same challenge. Now, I completely understand that it can't all be grant money, because that doesn't make sense. You know, energy projects are developer return. So those projects have the ability to take investment, but it's not always at the right rate or the right kind of investment to be able to close that gap. I mean, 25 million, somebody should be able to write you a check before you leave here. But, you know, we need to solve that problem. And this is the challenge that I've had with this COP, although I'm incredibly optimistic. I think the level of momentum is unstoppable at this COP. However, the deliverance or the devil or whatever is in the details. And so we're hearing all of these commitments, but we've heard commitments before. And it is a matter of how you operationalize those commitments to actually deliver. And I think it's the same thing that we're seeing with the projects and the money. It is being able to have the dialogue to close the gap, whether we make adjustments in the projects and adjustments in the kind of capital that's available to be able to close the gaps, because we have to apply pressure from both sides.
So I'm going to ask all of you after this question that's going to get me fired. But before I do that, I'm going to ask all of you one question. So when we leave here on the 15th, what is the one thing that we need to do? Like seriously, like a one practical thing. You talk about operationalizing. You know, what's one thing that you would like to us or yourself to do as we leave here? But before that, for all of you, I really don't know who to ask. What boggles the mind for me is that there's all this tourist industry that is present in SIDS and makes enormous resources in that space. And how is it possible that at least some of that private money cannot be leveraged for local development? Because we see over and over again, I was in Fiji, for example, and you know, difference between the capital city and the holiday resorts is just mind-boggling. So how do we leverage a little bit, maybe this momentum of climate neutrality to actually push them also to invest a lot more into local infrastructure?
I think we are addressing the whole issue of transformation. Someone spoke earlier about the need not just for there to be transformation of economies, but also of institutions. When we begin to speak about a lot of these investments, we just need to follow the money to see where these investors are. So the artifact may be in the Caribbean, but the tour operations and the tour operators are not residing in the Caribbean. And so unless these structures change, we'll continue to have significant leakages taking place. I'll give you one perverse case. In the Caribbean, for example, most of our tourists come either from North America or Europe. Yet we have to pay entities like some big airlines, whose names will not be mentioned here, to be able to service those routes, to bring tourists to our economies. Now, When you begin to factor those things in, you begin to see the disconnect between what is perceived as wealth and what is actually happening on the ground. And that's some of the challenges we face. I want to get back to one last point, pivoting towards the issue of small island states. It cannot be a one-size-fits-all approach. And what I'm getting at is when you have small economies, the sunk costs are still very high. Therefore, to get the kinds of investment you require, oftentimes you have to offer incentives. Those incentives sometimes come in sweetheart deals. You have a single operator because you're not going to get the kind of competition you're looking for because you do not have the market size to generate the kind of competition to lend towards dampening of prices. So what do you get into? You get into monopoly structures, whether naturally or by design. And so that also frustrates the transition process. Otherwise, it would then be dependent almost exclusively on public financing.
I think it's really important we start talking openly about these things because we will go in circles if we don't start tackling the real problems.
Yeah,
Raquel.
and certainly.
I love having good panels.
We are battling with, I think, prior to COVID, we were just starting to have the conversation about with the airlines and their Corsia plan, with the tourism industry who was finally beginning to turn the corner with the kind of investment, and they don't have the margins that we believe that they do to start off. So their capacity to invest isn't as high as you would imagine. But then COVID hit and the tourism industry plummeted. And so they are not available for that conversation at all now because they have been decimated. Not all of our tourism structures will survive. And so now we're having to start over that conversation, but we do need to look at where the money is. And I know a lot of times, there's this talk of greenwashing and, don't talk to the oil and gas industry. I think we have to talk to them because they need to see the future of their industry is not fossil fuels. They need to be focused on the future of their industry is energy. And so they need to transition with the times and they need to invest in the changes that need to take place. And those are the kinds of difficult conversations that we need to have to be able to make the investments that are necessary.
Thank you. So let us go to the last round. Like, what do you want to get out of this? Like, what do we need to do on the 15th of this Monday? Let's say weekend for rest, but Monday, the 15th of November. So barring nobody writing you 25 million check, Tina. So what do you think is the one thing that you would like to see happen in the next 6 to 12 months to change this situation?
Well, I'm focused on the next week and how that I think, yes, the next 6 months and the years, the decade really that we're in right now. But in this week on the 15th, the Marshall Islands has been very vocal. Our goal is to see really a package of outcomes that helps deliver on the promises that we all made in Paris. And it has to be a package. The Paris promise was a package, and that package included, it included 1.5, which for the islands continues to be the line we cannot cross. It means adaptation, particularly adaptation financing, and in general, just means to implement, getting back to what we were saying on both mitigation and adaptation. It also means recognizing that there will things that that we're losing and will be lost. And how do we address that as a global community? Going back to that piece around implementing, we want to implement. It's time. We can't be negotiating. I don't want to come back in a year to talk about Article 6 or all these negotiated items. I want to come back and talk about how we've managed to implement part of our electricity roadmap. But yes, there's still, and I expect there's still gaps, and we're back to see how we can address those gaps. Whether it's the 25 million we need to get to our 2030 target or the 120 million gap overall that we have to get to 100% renewable by 2050. That's what I want to come back next year. So next year, that's what I hope that we're coming back to do, is talking about implementation.
I really hope we do that. Mark.
I couldn't agree with my colleague more, but if I only had two wishes, my two wishes would be: first, ambition. We have to cut emissions in alignment with the 1.5 goal. Reason being, we cannot adapt our way out of this situation. It will also help if we're able to cut emissions to free up some of the monies that we are using year after year to build back. You know, I hear the cliche term, build back better. We would only just love to be able to build back, because when a hurricane, a category 3 or a category 4 hurricane hits us, sometimes as much as 200% of our GDP is wiped out in a single event. And I'm only talking here about first order impacts. Grenada was category 3 hurricane. She lost 215% of her GDP. And we haven't gotten to speaking about what it did to her nutmeg crops, which will take 10 years to come back. The market is not waiting on her to come back. She has lost market share as well. She's lost livelihoods. She's lost reputation. Those are not things you can easily go and purchase on the open market. So we have to cut emissions. And then there must be some space for adaptation financing, because again, half a bridge will get us nowhere. And giving us just sufficient to build half a bridge is perverse, because we remain in a perpetual cycle of dependence and never really building resilience that we ought to. Thanks.
Thank you, Raquel.
The thing that I need, what I want for Christmas on December 15th, I want 10 milestones for every commitment that has been made at this COP that will lead us in preparation for the next COP. And I want to be able to track. The UN announced on Friday that they would be tracking the commitments and the delivery on those commitments. And I'm amazed that it's taken us that long to figure out that that's what we need to do. But if we can get 10 milestones and then be able to track for each commitment, are you ahead? Are you behind? So that by COP27, we're not talking about, oh, this commitment from last year hasn't been made. We would have known who's ahead and who's behind. And the activists and everybody else who is watching this, like our lives depend on it, because our lives do depend on it, will have an opportunity to take action. We can't keep taking one-year leaps towards nothing. We have to be able to track on an ongoing basis. And I mean, honestly, if you ask me what I really, really wanted, I want hour by hour tracking, but I'd be willing to take month by month tracking of the implementation of these commitments, because as much as we need to see far more commitments, the commitments mean nothing if they're not implemented. So let's start there. Let's build some capacity and confidence in our ability to deliver what we say we want to do.
Thank you. Dr. Nawal.
So I'm hoping by the 11th, we would have heard about our submitted interest to host COP28, and the UAE, I mean, hosting COP28. And if that took place, we would definitely work with current presidency, Africa presidency, to ensure that exactly what you just mentioned is happening, that we are not only talking about pledges and not talking about commitments, but actually having a very clear roadmap and implementation map for those commitments. And as I'm sure everybody's aware, COP28 is going to be the first stocktake of the Paris Agreement. So we are hoping by then, and we are not going to only hope, we are going to work hard with the support of all our partners, because it is partnership, and all our alliances and everybody who helped us to get here so far, and hopefully will help us to achieve a very successful COP then to make this happen. So for us, it's going to be a mission to ensure that it does happen. And of course, the support of IRENA is going to be extremely valuable out there.
Thank you so very much. I invite you all to come to Abu Dhabi in January. So we start with tracking because this is exactly what our Director General spoke about in the beginning. We want to already take stock of what happened in September in New York and what happens at COP so that we don't lose 1 minute in going forward. Thank you so much. It was a delightful conversation with all of you, and I hope we get an opportunity to talk again. Thank you for staying with us.